All right, ladies and gentlemen, I believe it is time to actually continue the whole endgame discussion, and I guess in a way, the Powercreep discussion, except this time, instead of Honkai Star Rail, instead of Wuthering Waves, it's going to be about, well, Genshin Impact. And this video is by Juice Chan, who, from what I've been seeing on their page, they released this video about 4 weeks ago, and I guess they hated the Spiral Abyss so much, and they hated where Genshin Impact was going, that they just started making Wuthering Waves content. They started with their own honest thoughts on WoW 2.0, and they've been kind of just trucking forward ever since. And I can only imagine it's due to the disappointing state of the games that they're currently playing. And let me just be honest, ladies and gentlemen, they're doing very good in Genshin. They're getting like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50k views on their Genshin content, but their dislike of whatever this is has been so high that they have just quit other Hoyoverse games altogether. They've quit their HSR content right over here. And now Juice Chan is moving forward into WoW. And so with that, I'm excited to see what their take is on it. They're obviously somebody that I think cares about these types of games, and they've packaged up everything wrong with the 5.2 Spiral Abyss, which I imagine the problems are still spreading forward into 5.3, the most recent one. And I'm excited to hear what some of their thoughts are. And so with that, I provided all the context. I'm gonna move my camera up so you all can see the captions, and let's just go ahead and get right on into it.
5.2's Spiral Abyss is terrible. Genuinely one of the worst abysses that Genshin has ever put together, so we need to talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. The Abyss has been progressively getting harder and harder over
You got the constipated beast, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I was talking about on the debate with Pokey. These guys are a bunch of assholes. They're kind of hard to deal with.
time. It's becoming very noticeable. You can make the argument that yes, power is obviously scaling upwards over time. Compare the enemies in the 1.0 Abyss to now. The difference is night and day. Enemy rotations have to be different, right? Yes, well, this recent jump in difficulty is kind of absurd. You see, this was actually something that I feared when I realized that all the not long characters that we've gotten so far have been really good. The Abyss would then scale to match that level of quality. Fontaine was a region which was chock full of good units. However, even the absolute worst bosses were quite manageable. Notlan stepped it up to a whole other level. This Abyss is genuinely, wholeheartedly, one of the worst in Genshin's history.
And if 5.2 Spiral Abyss was really bad, again, I can imagine that 5.3's was like equally as bad or potentially worse, because there's literally calculations, right, that the Mavuika Silali team has the highest damage in the game. Like it's like 30 or 40k higher damage per second than other teams that are like tier 0 or the highest tier in the game. So like Mavuika and Silali is in like a whole tier of its own, and then every other team is like 30 to 40k DPS lower than it. The Mavuika Silali team is like 100k. The other ones are like 60 to 70.
I haven't met a single soul yet who played through this reset and said that it was fair and balanced. Sure, it's balanced if your definition of balanced is an ant with one leg. It's the most frustrating nonsense in the world. I understand that they want to push the banner units, but this is taking it a bit too far. Novelette is the best DPS in the game, therefore, let's add a whole bunch of annoying bosses that will utterly
Not true anymore, because Mavuika is now the best.
knock your socks off. Zhongli is an impressive shielder, so we need to make the Tenebrous Papilla an insane creature which knocks you over the same way that a cat knocks glass objects off of a table. The Krukosaur is nigh impossible without our beloved Lady Farina. Sure, she does indeed have one of the highest ownership rates as recorded on any website which tracks that kind of stuff, but newer players may have missed her banners in favor of other characters.
This thing flies with a pyro shield. Guys, if you aren't familiar with how absolutely diabolical this is for the game, it is something that flies, which obviously only ranged characters can damage. And then it also has a shield, which means that the only ranged characters that can damage it are Hydro ones. Or I guess like technically Electro ones too, right? Because they can like overload it. But this looks awful. This looks like something like if you don't have Farida, maybe like C6 Yalan can take it out.
Popular? Sure, as she should be. We all love Lady Farina in this household. Yet even so, how are non-Farina havers meant to comfortably deal with this thing? I've noticed that Chaska makes this thing a breeze.
Chaska makes this thing a breeze. Oh. I bet she does.
Whittle down its shield super quickly, and her aerial combat style suits her to killing the boss excellently. And while it's nice against the Golden Wolf Lord,
Doesn't that look like so much fun? Let me just replay that really fast.
Shield super quickly, and her aerial combat style suits her to killing the boss excellently. And while it's nice against the Golden Wolf Lord, oh my goodness, you have to sacrifice the 4th bullet always being guaranteed in favor of bringing a Geo character, because otherwise, good luck dealing any damage to that thing. Yes, you are forced to player handicapped if you want your full continuous run to go well. Just great. And the Tenebrous Papilla? This thing will either totally nuke you before you can fill up its stun bar, or you will stun it, get some damage in while it's down, then experience your sanity falling into the abyss in real time as you struggle to escape its excessively violent attacks. It hits stupidly hard for no reason. Incredibly artificial way to bring shielders back into the meta. The abyss has progressively been getting worse and worse as time has went on. Sure, however, it was nothing that we couldn't manage, but this? Yeah, it's something, I'll say that much. Hoyoverse themselves said that they wouldn't focus too much on Genshin's endgame due to potentially causing excessive anxiety. Really now. Making a separate mode where all of the bosses are insane nonsense like this would be far less stressful than shoving them all into one abyss in my opinion. To be fair, I do generally enjoy that abyss is harder on the whole now. We do want a degree of difficulty here.
So, the abyss is harder. The whole endgame anxiety thing, I guess, is not really a thing anymore. But they maybe geared up the difficulty so high to the point where it's getting similar to HSR. In that, in HSR, it is mandatory that you bring certain characters to certain type of content. And if you don't, you literally can't clear it. And while I do believe that there is obviously like a skill element in Genshin, because whatever this Tenebrous fucking Papilla looking dude is doing over here, you should be able to dodge each of its attacks, right? Like if you're playing well, you should hypothetically be able to dodge every single one of this Papilla's attacks. But I am assuming that the alternative is you get hit a single time and you wipe. Like your character's gone if you get hit a single time. And that kind of difficulty, right? That's something that's in holograms in Wuthering Waves, right? But you don't have Jades locked behind, or you don't have your Astrite locked behind holograms on a weekly resetting basis. You take damage even if you dodge against this boss. You take damage if you don't, even if you dodge this boss's attacks. Okay, yeah, these devs don't know what they're doing.
But this is just frustrating. Horrible enemy lineup. My hypothesis is simple. Hoyo created the Imaginarium Theater as the game's new easy endgame. The most you have to do is level up your characters and hope for the best. Because
Okay.
even in the game's hardest mode, the enemies aren't particularly tough.
Okay.
You can reach the bar to clearing over time once you've built enough units.
Okay, so one's a roster check that's super easy, and the other one is, I guess, obnoxiously difficult like this one is.
Therefore, free reign to make the Abyss as horrendous as humanly possible, right? I was generally fine with the Abyss, since I appreciated that the HP inflation and enemy lineups weren't too rough. I play the 3 other big gacha games for reference: Honkai Star Rail, ZZZ, and Wuthering Waves. I'd like to use Honkai Star Rail as an example here. Keeping up with the meta in that game is infuriating because of
This video is 4 weeks old, ladies and gentlemen. This video is 4 weeks old.
how rapid HP inflation is. The bias towards new characters is super clear in every new endgame mode that refreshes, and it drives me nuts. I actually really enjoy the
Based and
endgame
true.
modes in Honkai Star Rail, which is a big reason as to why I play that game, but holy heck, the power creep makes it kind of exhausting to keep up with the meta.
Guys, in the words of Mr. Jokey himself, Juice Chan is simply greedy and stupid. Editor, put up the tweet.
Let my character be good for longer than 3 patches, I beg of you. Genshin, please don't go down this route as well. The route that they're taking so far is bound to result in some of the worst characters being borderline unable to clear at the end of the day. If you don't play Honkai Star Rail, let me put it into perspective for you. Kinich came out in 5.0, yes? If this were Honkai Star Rail, he'd have already been replaced by somebody else next patch. Thankfully, we aren't at that stage with Genshin. We're nowhere near that sort of terror, in fact. But Hoyo, please, instead of excessive HP inflation, just add more Abyss floors. Giving everyone 1 to 2 extra pulls through Abyss rewards isn't gonna kill you, and considering how terrible the current Abyss is, you'd have to play for quite a few months before managing to clear comfortably. Even just making a boss rush game mode for this type of content to keep it out of the Abyss would be nice. But to be honest, it's not even like the structure of the Abyss is the key issue here, it's the enemy design. Tenebrous Papilla crashes into you over and over and over again, giving you barely any time to react or dodge. The only
Wait, he's literally creating like a fucking cancer field, and like you're taking the damage. Like your HP bar is like glowing purple and you're taking damage. He didn't even hit you. Okay.
The only character that actually feels comfortable up against this thing is Kenichi and Nouvelette. Both of those lads are able to keep their distance. Most of our characters feel garbage up against this thing. I know that they tend to jack up the difficulty of certain bosses from the overworld into the abyss, but like, come on! It shifts forms like once every time that you blink. Yes, I would rather have a boss which reacts to me as opposed to a nerd like the Ruined Serpent which digs itself underground half the time, or the abomination that is the Wennet. However, this isn't just hard, it's simply plain annoying. I know that you can very easily sum up this entire rant with skill issue. To that I say, sure, fair enough. However, the fact that nobody liked this abyss should indeed count for something.
So this is the thing. If the Abyss was like this, perhaps at the very start of Genshin Impact, it would be okay. Because people would be used to the baseline level of difficulty required to clear. But the fact that they're introducing this right after, I mean, let's be honest here, during Sumeru and the introduction of Hyperbloom, these devs made the Abyss a complete fucking joke. Like, all you did was just sit there and just spam an attack on a single fucking character, maybe dodge once in a while, and then Hyperbloom would just obliterate it from the fucking universe, whatever you were facing. And you guys, or the devs, basically made the game such low skill in terms of what was required to clear that it set a baseline expectation, right, for the effort that was going to be required. And now if you're going ahead and now drastically ramping up the difficulty with whatever the fuck this is, I can imagine that there's going to be a lot of people that, I mean, are upset. And it makes sense that they're upset. It makes sense that they're upset. Because if what I'm hearing is true, John Lee, the premier shielder, will get fucked against this thing. And anybody that mained John Lee against the shielder doesn't actually know what the dodge button does in this game. They don't know the dodge timings. They don't know like why you should dodge or when you should dodge, because they've just been face tanking attacks since the start of time, because that bro was released in like fucking 1.1 or something like that.
Indeed count for something. I'm also somebody with a pretty kitted out account. I have roughly 90% of the characters in this game if I were to make an educated guess, many of which are highly invested, constellated, and are within the current meta.
Even the big whaler is complaining.
Yet even so, I still found this abyss to be kind of annoying when trying to play different types of teams against it. The anxiety doesn't come from the endgame content being hard, it comes from it being borderline unfair. Listen, I quite like myself some difficult games from time to time. My favorite game of all time is Hollow Knight. Absolute Radiance is a difficult fight. However, it also happens to be a very fair fight. If you lose, that is literally just because you suck and you need to get good.
Same against pretty much every single boss in Wuthering Waves. I think Crownless is a complete piece of shit in the current Tower of Adversity reset. I think Crownless is a complete dickhead. I absolutely hate fighting him. But you know what? I also recognize that half of the time that I'm getting destroyed by him, I'm literally just missing my dodges. I'm playing like shit. I'm playing like a complete fucking bum. And I understand everything that happened in that fight that made me lose it. And I've also had many good clears against the boss where I play everything perfectly. I dodge the right attacks, I down him, I break his bar at the right times, and it's really smooth sailing in those clears. And I know exactly when I did those things right, and it feels good conquering that challenge. But from what I'm seeing here, this guy just feels like dog shit to play against pretty much all the fucking time, no matter what.
Fair, difficult fights are much more interesting than character checks, and this abyss is the weirdest character check ever. I understand that it's a game mode made with the specific intent of selling the characters on banners in mind, but even with that being in mind, you have historically been able to deal with most bosses through clever workarounds. Okay, I can call this abyss horrible all I want, but some actual changes need to be proposed. First of all, the Krukosaur shouldn't fly around the place. Keep it grounded so that melee hydros like Yelan and Xingqiu can shield break it more easily. The clear Farina bias is crazy. Secondly, we need some actual time to react to the Papilla's transformations. It shapeshifts at a ridiculous speed that is very hard to keep up with. It shouldn't literally two-shot you without a shield either, and that's another thing. Golden Wolf Lord? Why? When Chaska is one of the best answers to the Krukosaur? Okay, yes, Nouvelette banner, and it encourages the use of Shieldon and Zhongli, but Zhongli's a shielder. Who said that the Wolf Lord had to get involved? Dude, that borderline doesn't even make any sense, because Rift Hounds were infamously introduced to poison you even through shields.
Don't you guys like how in Wuthering Waves, you don't have to lock in a 4-person team for 3 fights? Isn't that a wonderful thing about WoWA? You don't have to lock in a 4-person team for 3 fights in a row. Oh, but I thought the Tower of Adversity was just a complete copy of the Spiral Abyss. But it turns out the TOA gives you a lot more freedom in roster checking and roster building, and, you know, doesn't force you, again, to use the same exact fucking team for, you know, content that, well, clearly as we're demonstrating it right fucking here, the optimal characters for each boss have to be combined into a single team, and it ends up that, like, the shit doesn't really fucking work at the end of the day.
I don't quite get the marketing strat here. It's restrictive in ways that don't make any sense either. Eon Blight Drake on 12.3.2? Why? Ah yes, let's slap in the boss, which shills bow characters despite both of the current limited 5-star reruns not being bow users. Nuvolite has a great range to be fair, but it still ends up feeling like a weird choice. Using S-tier pyro DPSs such as Arlecchino and Linny feel awful on the first half too, thanks to the Krukosaur and Lava avatars. You have to remove some of these restrictions. It's such a frustrating character check that a lot of people quite simply won't be able to deal with. I understand that the Abyss has to scale upwards because then the enemies would seem like pushovers when put up against their powerful collection of meta characters. If I could remove one enemy from this Abyss, it'd be the Tenebris Papilla. Such a dumb boss. Either nerf it or show it the door, because I haven't a clue as to what Hoyoverse was trying to shield here with that thing. Isn't it more partial to Not-Long characters anyway? Yes, perfect. Time to slap in this boss, right when we have no Not-Long units on banners. Makes all the sense in the world.
Hey, this just means that you're being rewarded for being frugal and intelligent instead of greedy and stupid. You should have known that this boss was coming up. You should have known that this boss was coming up, and you should have invested in those Natlan characters. And you want to know how you should have known? Because of course, you have the crystal ball that can look into the future and let you know the future value of your characters, right? Otherwise, you're greedy and stupid. Put up the tweet again, editor.
Sure, buddy. The Abyss has steadily been rising in total HP count over time, with enemy mechanics only becoming more and more frustrating. At this rate, I'm genuinely not sure as to when things are going to calm down inflation-wise, if things are even planning to calm down. So I think it's safe to say that the Abyss is indeed getting worse. Hoyo cranked things up from 0 to 100 way too fast. They have always handled things very slowly power creep-wise, and while speeding things up a little is fine,
True.
Nobody is asking you to follow in the footsteps of the Memory of Chaos Hoyoverse.
But the game's going in such a good state. The game's in a good state with rampant power creep that forces you to pull the new limited characters to have any chance of clearing the endgame. That's good. It's good. The old characters can still clear. Just make sure you pull the newest ones.
Less character checks and more actual boss mechanics which anybody can interact with. That's what we really need. The best way to describe this Abyss. I'll tell you all a little story. Once upon a time, I was a kid doing random battles on Pokemon X and Y. I had a Giratina, which I got from GTSing a random level 100 Kangaskhan.
Alright, what the fuck does this mean?
But I daycared up for the sake of getting legendaries. I gave a lad a Gricius Orb, and I had a blast cooking everybody on random singles. However, this one nerd brought along his stall Clefable. Easy, I said as I tried to Giratina it into oblivion. Yeah, no cigar. That thing made me mauled into oblivion as they built up buffs over numerous turns, and I continued to spam offensive moves because I was a brainless kid with no actual strategic knowledge. Then I eventually had my whole legendary team swept by some darn pink thing, that new stored power. Stored power, my behated. There are a few amount of times where I have molded as hard as I did on that day. This lovely Abyss reset has given me the pleasure of understanding that long-lost ancient frustration again. Clefable designed this Abyss, I will not be thinking otherwise. Definitely let me know what you thought about this Abyss down below in the comments. Was it that bad for you, or did you find it alright? I'm curious to know. Friendly reminder that I've got a ZZZ second channel. Go head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some silly, fun ZZZ content.
Alright, so my overall thoughts on that video were, I think they brought a lot of the proof. I think they brought up a lot of examples when it comes to like how this Abyss is absolutely complete dog shit compared to the prior ones. And I'm not sure if this was something that has been building up over the course of Genshin Impact. I'm assuming, or I've heard, that the 5.3 Abyss is actually genuinely worse, which is like kind of insane. The whole like Pokemon thing, I had no idea what the fuck she was talking about, and so I think she could have chosen like like a better analogy for that, because like you have to know what Pokemon is, like who plays competitive Pokemon. But overall, I think that it was a clearly concisely thought out video. I obviously have taken a break from Genshin Impact for over like 9 months, 9 or 10 months by now, and I still understood exactly what was going on, and I can see how this design is becoming more and more of a problem. And it's a trend that we're seeing across pretty much every single Hoyoverse game at this point. The predatory banner system isn't enough. The QOL in Natlan wasn't enough. Now you got to make sure that Natlan characters are the only ones that can actually succeed in the Abyss, because hey, where's the money? We need the money. That's now the Hoyoverse motto. 3 games isn't enough. 3 revenue streams isn't enough. They gotta fuck up all their other games too in pursuit of that cash. So let me know what you all think. I thought this was a great vid. Peace out.